he came into our city room on election night. Anyhow, back to my thing was, we would go to editors. Like in 1962, Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring, and she said we're poisoning our air and water. Now that's a pretty big story, and maybe we ought to stop. And so we would go to our editors and say, how about I do a story on the Susquehanna and how polluted it's getting? And I have a friend who came out of Penn State at the same time. He was dealing with a national editor. The editor said, that doesn't sound very sexy to me. What's more important than we're running out of drinkable water? And if we had stories then, and we had kicked the butt of politicians, maybe Cape Town, Mexico City, there's a city in Australia and a city in Spain, they're all running out of water now. This could have been foreseen and dealt with. And they do it again and again and again. And the Nixon administration figured out a way to lock up anti-war kids without a trial and without criminal charges. And they were doing it. They would bring them before a federal grand jury and ask them questions they knew they wouldn't answer. And when the kid refused, they would put them in jail for the remainder of the 18 months of the grand jury term. Right. And this was very hard on the college girls. It was hard on the boys too, but the boys, I must say, usually when boys and girls that age do something, the girls are much more efficient. In this case, the boys were more willing to put up with it. And when they would let them out, when the grand jury would expire, the term would expire, as they let them out, they would hand them a subpoena for the next federal grand jury, which convened in 2 weeks. So everybody knew they could go home for 2 weeks and they'd be right back in that stand. Wow. This is how you establish a police state. If you find a way to send your citizens to jail without a trial, without criminal charges. And that's what they were doing. And you know what saved us? Was Watergate. Not the press, it was Watergate. The Nixon administration got busy with Watergate, and before I blame Nixon too much, the Bobby Kennedy Justice Department was doing the same thing with mafia leaders. But nobody cares about mafia leaders.
That's right.
And
you're watching the Ernest Faison Show. I'm here with my special guest, Mr. James Brann. He's sharing his life experiences. He's been a reporter. He's been in the military. He's been a professor at BU. And also on the board of directors with the communications department. Is that correct?
No, I was chairman of journalism.
Chairman of journalism. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears here because we want to keep things rolling. So, doing sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and all these things, and Vietnam and everything's going on. You being a reporter, were you able to matriculate up toward Woodstock? Any of that stuff going on there?
No, because the music of your generation is so awful, I avoided Woodstock.
You did tell me that.
I'm a jazz person.
Oh, are you? So I am as well. I'm a Miles Davis, Coltrane, Bird Parker,
Well, one of my favorite interviews of all time was Louis Armstrong.
Oh!
And this was in...
Ladies and gentlemen, I have Mr. Brann on my show. He already told me that he's already interviewed Dr. King. This photo here that I'm about to show you was taken 2 months before Kennedy assassination. Now he tells me, you want to go ahead and expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I assumed they couldn't get at him. He came to Harrisburg for a concert. And I assumed he would be very well guarded, like
Louis Armstrong,
like most
Satchmo.
Yeah, like most people are at his level.
Yes.
And I knew he wouldn't be in the Penn Harris because the Penn Harris was the elegant hotel, and they didn't take black people in those days. This was 61.
Yeah.
And but I figured the Harrisburger probably would. And the Harrisburger was even a newer hotel. In many ways, it was nicer. So I went over to the desk, and I tried to the desk of the hotel.
Yeah.
And I tried to look important, and I said, please tell me what room Mr. Armstrong's in. Not expecting he would. And he said, oh, that'd be room 365. And I went up in the elevator, knocked on the door, and Louis answers. And he's kind of cranky because I woke him up.
Oh.
Today they would not do that. They would not do that.
Wow.
I mean, I could have been a terrorist.
That had to be amazing. What a wonderful world. Unbelievable.
Well, you know what he did? He was kind of cranky. He didn't want to do the interview. He said, I'll talk to you after the show. I said, I got a deadline. I'll be fired if I don't get this. Now, that was a slight exaggeration, but I was pretty sure he wouldn't know it was a slight exaggeration. So he pulled out scrapbooks and he sat down and talked to me. He was very nice.
That's
and I was imposing. And he was short, too.
Satchmo.
Yeah. I didn't expect that either.
So would you what's top 3 interviews in your lifetime? Dr. King obviously won.
Yeah. I really like Louis, because once he stopped being cranky, he was telling me about politics in South America. He'd just come back from South America, and I don't know much about politics in South America, but he didn't know. He really didn't know much about South America. But he was trying to be helpful. He was trying to give me something so I'd get out of there.
What's the third one?
Who would be
You've
the third?
done so many. I do realize. I don't want to put you on the spot, I mean,
you know who I liked a lot was William Holden.
William Holden.
It was early 80s, about 3 months before he tripped over a stool in a alcohol rehab center late at night, fell, hit his head, and hit it on another stool and died. I talked to him 3 months before he died. But I'd just come back from Washington that morning, and I'd brought in the papers, and I was bitching at my sons, and I said, "Why didn't you bring in the papers? Burglars would, you know." And I saw that there was going to be a press conference of a movie he'd just done at the Penn Harris Hotel. So I called a guy, a friend, and said, "Can I pretend I'm working for your paper?" He said, "Sure, but I'm not going to run it." So I went down there, and I went up to the desk in the Ritz in Boston, and the guy said, "Let's see your invitation." And I didn't have an invitation, of course. And
Wow.
he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. This is by invitation only." So I figured, well, up those stairs, there's got to be a coffee room. Coffee room's got to be where the movie stars are. And if I just walk up and stick my head in every room, I'll find. I walked up, walked in a room, and there was William Holden, the only guy in the room drinking coffee.
Wow.
And you're not going to believe this. He was really short. I couldn't believe it.
Is there a theme going on here, Mr. Brann? Everybody's short.
Well, you know,
Martin Luther King, Satchmo,
yeah,
all these people are short.
Yeah, and
Did you run into Muhammad Ali during your travels at all?
no, I did not. I think maybe he wouldn't have been short.
No, because he float like a butterfly and he sting like a bee.
He was so wonderful. But Holden was short, and he was very nice. In those days I smoked. You get bumming cigarettes from me through the whole thing. And all of a sudden I realized all the editors just sent their photographers. There's no reporters here. There's just kids, kid photographers and real photographers, and kids who are just here, they're journalism students. Nobody's going to ask him any questions. I was ready to leave because I'd talked to Holden. I wanted one thing from Holden. I wanted to know his agent. And he gave me the agent. I couldn't believe it. But I was ready to leave. And then I realized it's going to be pretty dull. I mean, Julie Andrews was there, Robert Preston was there, William Holden was there. So I sat there and asked questions because I knew nobody else would, because it would have been very boring for the movie stars to sit there and have nobody care about them.
When you look back on your life, and you still have a lot left, what were some of the crowning moments that you would say were just signature moments in your life? Especially when you know, doing all the reporting and the writing and, you know, BU and all the places and things that you've done.
Well, I really enjoyed covering the Jfk campaign for 3 days in 1960 in Pennsylvania, because I didn't expect much. And I didn't expect he'd be that charismatic. He wasn't short, by the way. He was about 6'1", maybe. Probably a little under 6'1". Mm-hmm. But that was a lot of fun, because you're in a right-wing area, and all of a sudden, people are mobbing the Democratic candidate. I enjoyed those 3 days immensely. I also enjoyed immensely the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yes, you spoke about that.
That was a lot of fun, and they let the reporters set up on, what's the ridge there where the rebels ran up and got slaughtered at Gettysburg. Anyhow, they let us sit up on top of the ridge, and you could see looking down, this would not be a good place to be an infantryman running up into the face of people with, they didn't have automatic rifles.
You know, you're a man after my own heart. I thought that you was going to tell me that you were the guest at Hugh Hefner's Playboy.
never got invited.
Playboy Mansion, and that you had carte blanche service throughout that whole process.
That's the wrong coast. But there had been people who had waited at the top of that ridge all night long
Right.
because they wanted to see it, and they threw them out for the reporters. So there's a chanting mob behind us yelling, "Kill the reporters, kill the reporters." And my brother was there with the mob. I'd brought him down to see my younger brother. And I said, "What'd you do when they started chanting?" He said, "Hell, I was chanting with them. I didn't want them to get mad at me."
Now, do you still have affiliation with, obviously, Boston University? Do you still?
I go and substitute for friends. And I would like to say this is the nicest generation I've seen. I think maybe they're too nice to go out into the world.
Wow.
When I started in '73, we had leftover kids from the late '60s.
Okay.
And some of the males were Marxists and tough as hell. If you went out for lunch and you had a class in the afternoon, you couldn't have a glass of wine because you never knew when some wise guy male was going to stand up and start spouting the Marxist propaganda at you. And they knew, they'd read every word of Marx, and they wanted to tell you how capitalism would not work. And you had to be ready to shut them down. You couldn't go in there with a glass of wine.
You're watching the Ernest Faison Show. Of course, I'm the host, Ernest Faison. I'm talking to Mr. James Brann. He's telling us and educating us on how he was in the presence of Dr. Martin Luther King, Louis Armstrong, and William Holden, and several others. And these are things that you hear about and you read about in the books, but we're getting it firsthand from the horse's mouth. And I find it very, very fascinating. And I'm just so glad that we were down there at Horseneck Beach flipping that football around. And what did you say about me and my buddy? Say, the football never hit the ground.
Yeah, I'd watched you several times, and you guys, you know, you're old guys out there throwing the football, and you never drop it.
Yeah, well, I got a little skills. My cousin's Ray Lewis with the Baltimore Ravens, but the only thing about it is that Ray's got more money than me, and I'm not too happy about that.
I used to live in Baltimore, and I can't get a decent crab cake in New England.
Oh, the crab cakes. Oh, boy, that's good stuff.
They put too much bread in them up here.
Yeah, they do. They do. Is there anything that you would like to, discuss briefly that possibly we haven't discussed?
I'd like to tell you about Edith Evans Asbury. She was one of the top reporters on the New York Times. She was once on a train with Khrushchev and Mrs. Khrushchev and 400 male reporters. And she got at Mrs. Khrushchev. She beat all the male reporters, got an interview. Some of them to their dying day wanted to kill her. But she was
Peter Khrushchev, yeah, whatever it was. Yeah.
And Mrs. Khrushchev taught English in Russia.
Okay.
So she spoke English. And she liked Edith. Everybody liked Edith. She's a tiny little Southern girl, smart as a whip, and Irish. And but one day, about 10 years later, I invited her. She was in Boston. I invited her to speak to one of my classes, and so I introduced her, and I said we met at the Battle of Gettysburg, the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, and so forth. And she talked. She was wonderful. She's wonderful with everybody. And after the kids left, she said, "Jim, you know, when you introduced me, you said we met at the Battle of Gettysburg. You didn't say the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg." I said, "Edith, that proves what I've always suspected. They don't listen to a word we say."
That is really, really funny. Being Irish, where did the leprechaun come from, Jim?
I have no idea.
we always, I'll just getting out my last little shots here. You got 6 grandkids, the apples of your eye, right? Didn't you tell me you were down in Wickford there the other day?
We were at the New Bedford Zoo,
okay.
which is a nice zoo for little kids. A lot of mothers with little kids. It's not a nice zoo for sophisticated 10 and 12-year-olds.
Right.
The elephants are 90 years old. They don't move much. There's a water buffalo there that I think probably is stuffed. He doesn't move at all.
Is that right?
But it's a nice place if you're a mother. You won't get mugged there. It's a nice place.
Yeah, so
Parking's free.
84 years young, you walk 2 or 3 miles a day, is that right?
Yeah.
And what a scenic area to be walking in there, by the way.
It's a nice place, except it's usually windy and cold in the wintertime.
Yeah.
I don't know why you and your pal aren't out there in the wintertime.
We are, actually. And I'm foolish enough to do the polar bear plunge there in Newport.
Really?
Yeah.
That is foolish.
Yeah. Especially for somebody who looks like me.
You can
know
die.
What I mean? Yeah. I've done it 17 years, Jim.
Really?
Yeah, it's something.
Never got pneumonia?
No. Maybe a little shrinkage, but I think I'll be all right. But my mother says something's wrong with him. Something's wrong with him.
I think your mother has a point.
I'm going back to Jethro Bodine with the the Beverly Hillbillies. When he talked to Jethro, who's about as dumb as a box of rods, yet I gotta have a long talk with that boy. That's what I get all the time from getting in that cold water January 1st.
I come from mountain country in Pennsylvania where they just had a big fracking boom.
Yes.
Every poor farmer up there thought he was going to be Jed Clampett.
Really?
They all thought they were going to, and I kept saying, look, they're like big gas companies, like big oil companies. You don't think big gas companies are any nicer, they're going to screw you. And you're going to pollute your water, your farmland, your water. They were determined to be Jed Clampett, and what happened was the international gas market went down and they lost interest in that part of the country and they just left.
Wow. This is the Ernest Faison Show. I'm the host, Ernest Faison. I'm here joined by Mr. James Brann, professor, Boston University. He's done a lot of different things, as you folks can hear, and I can just talk to this man all day. We're going to take a break for a moment and we'll be right back with you.
You hear people say it all the time. Someone else will do it. Someone else will donate blood. Because someone needs blood every 2 seconds. I'm happy to do it. It's just that it's a lot for one person to take on. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Welcome back to the Ernest Faison Show. Thanks for joining us again. I'm here with Mr. James Brann, and we're just talking about a bunch of fascinating things and some of his life's highlights. And Mr. Brann, you want to continue speaking about something that was near and dear to your heart concerning water.
Water is really important to us.
Absolutely.
We need some every day. I have a neighbor who's an international water engineer, or I did when I lived in Rhode Island. And I asked him one day, this was about 72, I said, suppose the president called you in today and said, I'll give you all the money you need and all the staff you need. Can you save our continental water tables? And the guy looked into his cup of coffee and he said, I can if we do it right now. And I said, what do you mean by right now? He said, in 8 to 10 years it'll be too late. And it's more than 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
And he said it would step on a lot of toes, a lot of people who could make big campaign contributions. He said, no politician's going to do that. And I said, even if we run out of water? He said, we're already running out of water. This was 72.
1972.
Yeah.
You know, funny that you said that. I'm going to piggyback on that. It was told to me that obviously, with gasoline and cars and all these different toys, that the war is with oil, and we went to war with Saddam Hussein over oil, supposedly.
Yeah.
They said the next really big thing is going to be the war over water. Do you agree? Or has
agree.
that become to fruition?
Nations are going to have to fight over water.
Yes.
And they will, because we have no choice. We can take salt out of the ocean, but it's still very expensive to do it. We may have to just spend the money to do it.
Which is amazing to me, Mr. Brann, because 4/5 of the world's landmass is water.
But it's mostly salt.
Yeah, but you can put a man on the moon, you can cure, all these vicious ailments and things like that. How come we can't, put this mechanism in place to where we can purify the salt water, sodium chloride water, and make it become drinkable?
We can, and we do. It just costs too much to be efficient. And I think we're going to have to, bite the bullet and spend the money. But a lot of countries are too poor to do that.
Right.
And
Okay.
it is going to lead to wars. You're absolutely right. It will lead to wars.
Yes.
Nothing's more important than water. Nothing.
Yeah.
Even gold.
So, as I, try all these different things, on you and bouncing all these ideas off you, and of course, you who were there, shedding light on it, and we really appreciate my studio audience and my audience at home really appreciate you educating us and giving us this information, especially on a first-hand account. I do have to say to you, as an African-American gentleman sitting here before you, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. But also, because you were in the room with Satchmo, because you were with Dr. King and all these people, and you can speak to it because you were there, did you ever think in your lifetime, and you're very much alive, that you would see an African-American president in the United States of America? before the good Lord called you home?
No. I was very surprised. Very surprised. Very pleased, but very surprised.
Right. Your thoughts briefly on Obama.
He seemed like almost the perfect president. I wish he'd done a little more, but I can see why.
His hands were tied.
The first black guy wouldn't want to rock the boat too much. He did give us a national health program.
Obamacare.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't like it, but it's better than what we had before, which was, it should have been Medicare for everybody. That's what Medicare works.
Like the Canadians, they have this model.
Medicare works very well. I'm very pleased with it. You have to pay a little occasionally, but they never say so far, you can't have this operation, it would cost too much.
Right.
And a lot of people got told that before Obama was president.
Right.
A lot of people.
And of course, we're touching on a lot of things, and I'm sure people can appreciate it because you can speak on it because, I mean, you were there or you know the people who were there. So as we progress with this conversation, and we have a few more minutes here, people are trying to turn their head or a deaf ear to the fact that this global warming, when in effect, I saw like about a month ago, a glacier, which was the size of the state of Delaware. I thought it was going to say the size of 2 football fields or something. The state of Delaware has broken off. Yeah. And you know what I mean? We're getting warmer. Cell phones, microwaves, and everything. What's your thought on these things?
I think the people most scientists everywhere agree where the planet is warming. The people like our beloved president who say it's just a propaganda game, I think they should do a little research or talk to their own people. It sounds so foolish.
It's foolish.
I have friends in northern Pennsylvania, they're farmers, they're very conscious of the weather. They believe anything a Republican president says. And I say to them, the weather affects everything you do. And they say, yeah, and it's getting colder, not warmer. And
Getting colder, not warmer?
Yeah, actually, a few years ago, Scientific American had a cover on how, this was maybe 20 years ago, on how the planet is getting colder.
Oh, wow.
And I know that because my best student of all time is editor of Scientific American magazine.
Oh.
And she keeps me informed on all the science things. She's got a nice job. She flies all over the world and goes to meetings.
My name is Ernest Faison. You're watching the Ernest Faison Show. I'm joined by Mr. James Brann. He's educating us on some of the things that have come across his life and people who have shaped and molded really who he is. You know, as the clock ticks down, you know, when we look at Trump and possible meeting with the Korean, I want to call him a dictator, really. The first time in the history. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think either of them has the brain power to go into a meeting like this. And,
Indeed.
The Korean guy seems just absolutely.
He's just a clone.
He seems absolutely bonkers.
Yes, he does. He is a clone, and I often, tell a joke, you put these two in a round room and perhaps try to get them to try to find the corner, because I don't know that. What are your thoughts on Putin? I mean,
he's
Syria and Assad. I'm throwing a lot at you, but I value your opinion.
Putin's a bad guy. I mean, I know what he's doing internally. He's loosening up a lot from what Stalin and the other guys did.
Yeah, Gorbachev and all.
Yeah, so the internal, the people like him because things are nicer there now. But the guy has no conscience at all.
He has no conscience. I read an article, the most powerful man in the world, and it wasn't Trump. They had Putin's picture on there.
Well, in a way he is. I mean, he has nothing, he can do anything he wants. I mean, our president has some checks and balances on him, but Putin can do anything.
Yeah.
And
do you think it's a good idea that we meet with North Korean president?
Japanese don't.
Yeah.
I think we have nothing to lose, but I do think they're probably running a game on us. I don't think they have any intention.
And why all of a sudden, not to cut you off, at the 11th hour did Kim Sung-young meet with China there? I guess to prep him as to what the agenda should be going forth, or what are we looking at there?
He probably went over just to mend fences, to make sure they still like him and he likes them. I mean, I have no inside information, but he's got to keep the goodwill of China. He's got to.
Yeah, so they supply everything, right?
Yeah, and they could quash him like a bug if they wanted to.
Yes, they could.
And that's a good question, and I don't know the answer.
I mean, a man like you, I mean, when we can ask questions and it makes someone like you think, then, you know, makes me want to sharpen my number 2 pencil and you know, even put the axe to the ground a little bit more, because this is all intellectual stuff here. And I think that because you were a reporter, I just think you were at the forefront of a lot of these things that we've spoken about. And it's not like we just throwing things up in the air. I mean, you were there or knew somebody who was there. And that's why, to me, I find it very, very fascinating, you know.
I had friends who were in Korea in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And they all said the same thing. I said, it is cold. Well, it's right under Siberia.
It is, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah, yes, it is.
So it really is cold.
Yeah, I Marine Corps friends telling me about Whisper Alley and all these other places, and yeah, said it might not be a good place to be right there. But we need to behave over there in North Korea there, that DMZ area there, you know. And
we should work hard to keep the Chinese as friends, because we don't want them as I've had some Chinese students at BU, and I assume only the smartest get over here, but they are smart guys. And also, you wouldn't expect it, they're funny. They're very witty.
oh, really?
Yeah. And,
Dry sense of humor?
Yeah, it's kind of a self-deprecating, almost Jewish sense of humor. They make fun of themselves.
Oh, wow.
And they're funny. And they're smart as hell. I assume they're not all smart as hell, just the ones who get over to BU.
Right.
But the funny thing was that when they came here, initially, this would be back in the early 80s, the FBI really got close to them and helped them get a dorm and helped them get set up and so forth. Whenever they get a parking ticket in Boston, they go right to their FBI acquaintance. And of course, what the FBI wants is they assume these kids are destined for good things.
Yeah.
They figure someday this kid will be ambassador to France and they'll be able to go talk to him. That's why the FBI is so helpful to them.
That is amazing. So as you look at this whole thing, you know, I just really appreciate, sir, the fact that you've come on my show and you have shared some of these valuable pieces of information to my studio audience. I would like to thank you.
Thank you.
Coming on and sharing all these beautiful things, you know, there's Jim there, right there, young Hampson, 2 months before the assassination of Kennedy. So we hope that you enjoyed everything that we said. We threw a lot at you, but I thought I had the qualified individual who can actually stand up to that. My name is Ernest Faison. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to come into your living room. God bless. Take care till next time.